I'm gonna be honest, my life just hasn't been the same since I watched an online show about pitting two characters in a fight to the death. It honestly makes you feel inadequate. Like, yeah, sure, I mean, I can walk and stand up straight, but look at this pack of Twizzlers. I mean, at minimum, that's like large island level. When the early philosophers were studying stupid shit like Stoicism and Neo-Pythagoreanism, they should have instead spent their time asking the real questions here. Death Battle may not have started versus debating as an internet concept, but I'd argue it's what helped made it popular. Two host characters, Wiz and Boomstick, talk about each combatant and analyze their weapons, armors, and skills, and then a fight animation plays going over an ideal scenario if these characters were to actually meet, followed by them explaining the results. It's a pretty standard format, but I've been a fan since... well, not the very beginning, but close enough to where I can say, yeah, it was basically the beginning. Now, Death Battle's not a perfect show. It has been subject to its fair share of controversial results, and I have less than zero interest in going to some real down and dirty versus debating, but I like me some good internet content. It's fun learning about so many characters in the series they're from, and some of the fight animations make for some of the most iconic moments in this corner of the internet. Plus, right now, they're celebrating their 10th anniversary with the whole season of legacy matches. I've binged the entire show front to back, over 100 episodes, and I'm gonna rank each and every one of them by season because I'm literally insane. Plus, what better of a time is there to be a fan and to look back on how Death Battle has evolved into what it is today? So, Season 1. Well, we all gotta start somewhere. Yeah, I should go without saying, but since Death Battle started in late 2010, pretty much every episode I'll be talking about has its wrinkles, so let me just say right out of the gate that I don't hold Season 1 to the same standards as the rest of the show. Expect a shit ton of leniency throughout. So here are my rules that I'll be using for the rest of the ranking videos when I get around to making them. First off, I'm mainly judging the animation, since the battle is the show's namesake, and plus it's like 90% of the reason I tune in anyway. And I could be looking at writing, choreography, visuals, how well the characters are represented, all that silly fun giggle stuff. If moments in the analysis segment stick out enough for me to view an episode as good or bad, then I'll mention them, but for the most part, I'm gonna tell you which of the blurry pixels are my favorite. Secondly, verdict does not matter to me. Mostly. I mainly watch Death Battle to be entertained, so the ones that do it best for me will rank higher. Of course, if certain results are argued poorly, it could affect my opinion, but for the most part, I really don't care. And if that were to happen, I'm gonna go off of what Death Battle itself provides in its own research. I don't intend on observing every little incorrect fact they provide. That's not my thing. Virginity rocks, but not that much. And lastly, this is all my dumbass opinion. I don't think I need to explain that. If your own opinion's different from mine, or you disagree where I put certain episodes, then that's cool. Let me know why I'm a dipshit in the comments below. But this is my video, I do what I want. Nerds. Okay, we have a lot to go over, and I hope the introductions from this point forward aren't so fucking long, so let's get into murder. Oh boy, just the idea of thinking about what could be the lowest ranking episode in the very first season, it's gotta be like the worst episode ever, right? Well... yeah, actually. Justin Bieber versus Rebecca Black is the kind of episode that dates itself the day before release, because, yeah, an episode that bullies two kids making music people didn't like and animating them dying? No. I mean, they tried to fan the flames, since this is the only episode with a disclaimer right at the beginning, but all it amounts to is, hey, it's a joke, bro, we don't really mean it, just laugh a little, and if you're offended, then just don't watch, man. Okay, well, these satirical parody and entertainment purposes amount to just the most boring analyses. Most of Bieber's rundown is just Boomstick going like, why is he popular? Like, right as Wiz explains why. What do you mean little girls like this? It's like a rage face comic, but unironic and worse. Black's analysis isn't much better, but I'll be honest, I do kind of like analyzing her not knowing where the fuck to sit and standing in her car while on a US highway, like, what the fuck? Then again, this screen exists, and I fucking die forever. The fight? What do you want me to say? If you want it, it's short, nothing happens, and that one Bieber punching sprite makes you want to die, then, well, that probably makes one of us, I guess. I mean, they call back to Black taking ages to decide where to sit, which, again, I kind of like, but then they die abruptly. And so do the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus, because, sure, let's keep going on for the Ruffles and the XD Keck Lamals, sure. But going back to the beginning, while there are episodes that shit on certain combatants, the thing that makes those other episodes not as bad is that they're not real-life fucking people. These two were already getting massive amounts of shit, so I'm sure a video where the two fight to the death would go down super well. And even if you take all of that aside, even as a dumb teenager watching this, I didn't really find it all that entertaining. Definitely not helped by this following the big Mario vs. Sonic rivalry. Sure, you could say there's potential somewhere in how highlighting the toxicity of certain fandoms and hatedoms, and how they could affect not just the artist, but the industry as a whole. but there's like next to none of it here, and even then it's not done well if you can find something, so who cares? Thankfully, they learned their lesson with using real-life people in the show, but with a hurdle as low as this, it's unsurprising there was nowhere to go but up from here. At the very least, it's a case study as to why this is such an awful train wreck of an idea.
Woohoo! This goes down in history as the best death battle ever!
It was not. I think based on the description, we all knew how Rogue vs. Wonder Woman was gonna go. Badly. Like, I get that it's early in the show and we gotta give one of the hosts another characteristic other than redneck, but Sex Pest is not only the most predictable, but also one of the least funny. Now, you can sell horniness for comedy. It's just that death battle rarely does. And considering the material Boomstick gives me to work with is constantly pointing out tits and ass, calling Wonder Woman's clothing a stripper outfit, and getting cut off before he says what he would do to an unconscious Miss Marvel, I'm gonna be generous and say that's just a wee bit cringe. Boomstick being horny is one of the two reasons why the majority of episodes with combatants involving two women aren't really that good, unfortunately, which is made especially unfortunate given that the second reason is that all the enthusiasm is spent on Boomstick jacking off rather than making the fight scene any interesting. Wandy blitzes Rogue a bunch, Rogue absorbs her power, she blitzes Wandy, they both blitz each other, kissy kissy, and then we're just done. They use the same routine of Ragnaroking the shit out of each other 3 times in the fight, and it's just... I will say there is at least one good thing I can say about this episode that influenced Death Battle forever. The removal of those godforsaken health bars. No, I'm not joking. I'll go more into detail when it's relevant, but if that's the best thing I can say about an episode, then we're boned. I guess I'd rather have the sentiment of I'll fuck this fictional woman rather than I'll kill this real-life teenager, but does that really count as a positive? This iteration of horny Boomstick may have been the first, and the worst for that matter, but it is certainly not the last. Which leads us nicely on over to Chun-Li versus Mai Shiranui, boys. Don't worry though, Boomstick only implies sexual assault in this one. Progress! But yeah, other than that, more of this beer-stained yeehaw motherfucker talks about chicks some more, like, no thanks. The overlays even list their measurements, and for some reason there's shortcomings in the feet section? Not everything pre-fight is bad though. I kinda liked the gag of Wiz talking about Mai's outfit made to distract the opponent and Boomstick being distracted, and the drunk driving PSA is not only the best out of the season, but unironically the best part of the whole episode. And then the fight happens, and it's very short with little interesting choreography. Most of it is just the two of them landing combos on each other. No playing off each other's skills, maybe like one moment where Chun actually counters one of Mai's attacks, but it's pretty boring. But then they do this wall fight and it's actually kind of cool, at least compared to the action I already forgot about. It's something that takes advantage of two agile fighting game characters, and it does it pretty well. But then Mai dodges Chun's strongest attack with little in the way of shit giving. They're brought back to the ground, and then Chun turns into a Mortal Kombat skeleton, all with no build-up and just kind of happening. Man. Also, this episode starts a really weird trend where
her straightforward approach was a bad matchup against Mai's ninja training.
What the hell does that mean? I guess you can tie that to her agility and tricky fighting styles, but why not just say it doesn't compete with her agility and tricky fighting styles? How about I use my sick ninja training to just move on to the next entry? Yoshi vs. Riptor is a dumb episode, and if you can't tell by its placement, not in a good way for me. Analysis is fine for the most part, Riptor's is kind of nothing, but Yoshi's has a few noteworthy things. Wiz criticizing Boomstick's baby canyon idea for the not obvious reason was pretty funny. They also used non-canon Smash to discuss how Yoshi scales to Link, Snake, and Samus, but I guess it's the 8th episode, it just kind of stood out to me. And then this.
I don't think they're male or female. Yoshi's maybe asexual.
Well, you almost had it. The fight is stupid though. Riptor lands 1 million billion trillion hits and obliterates Yoshi for over half the fight and dominates everything, but then suddenly Yoshi lands 2 hits and a counterattack and then Riptor just dies. Yoshi pulling a win out of his literal factual ass verbatim is even worse when you consider the entire episode is written on the basis of Yoshi being this adorable, cuddly kitty character, and no way Yoshi could, like, you know, fight. What really does it for me is how hilariously Riptor's sprites clash with everything in just the most special kind of way. Also, one of the arguments for Yoshi winning is that he's smarter than Riptor because Riptor can't drive. Alright. The most I can say about Kratos vs. Spawn is that it exists. It functions as a perfectly acceptable episode with no amazing features or god-awful blemishes, and we're moving on. Listen, if I gotta talk about over 100 of these goddamn videos, then you're gonna get short segments like these, fuckos. And Zitz vs. Leonardo also happened. I do kind of like the idea of a character winning in the same series battle royale and then immediately following it up with another continuation, but I mean, I don't know. What do you want me to say other than I put this higher than the last one because, I like the combatants more, sure. At least editing's gonna be easier on me. Why not? Pile on Luke Skywalker versus Harry Potter with all that, but the only thing that really puts it above the last two for me is that cool shot of Luke using Shatterpoint to tear open Harry's scar. Then again, it was almost ruined for me with whatever this shit is. Also, I know this is a dumb nitpick given that everyone knows who Harry Potter is, but they haven't even mentioned the scar once in the whole episode prior to this moment, and it's barely noticeable in most of the footage in Harry's analysis, but
Today, we're pitting two of the most worthless damsels in distress against each other. It helps battle Ganon when necessary, has assisted Mario in battle several times.
Ugh, Jesus. Well, I can at least give Zelda vs. Peach credit in that there's no unfunny horny shit, but it's not like disrespect to either character with a hint of misogyny is any better. If there were like a joke or two portrayed as some edgy humor, then that'd be one thing, but they called Zelda a master manipulator when, in most cases, it's really just guiding Link in the right direction because it's not like her entire kingdom's at stake or anything. That as well as this.
Or baking cakes in the kitchen like any good woman should.
And both analysis end with Boomstick saying either princess should just fuck their respective rescuers immediately. Okay, given the chance, would you allow a dicking from Mario? At least Boomstick's response to the Vibe Scepter's funny. That makes up for it. The fight? Well, it's the first one not animated by Ben, but a new hire, Mr. Lange, who combines 2D sprite work and 3D backgrounds and does it pretty well. But other than that, watching this fight is basically going on autopilot. I like the shot of Zelda reflecting the sheep, the slap fight, the falling fight, and the death, but with all the nothing else that happens, along with Peach and Zelda sprites clashing in the most special way, and the bad analysis dragged this one down a lot for me. But oh, silly me for expecting so much in a female versus female fight in Season 1. Bomberman vs. Dig Dug also falls into the I have little to say category of episodes, and would have helped make for a nice neat little quadrilogy of short segments had I not had enough issues with Zelda vs. Peach to drag it lower than this, so my entire flow is just fucked. The matchup's goofy enough to stand out in a positive way for me. I liked the end where Dig Dug doesn't explode Bomberman and leaves him to deflate so his own bomb will kill him, something that's so characteristic for both series it's not even funny. But that's it. I was terrified to revisit Felicia vs. Tao Kaka. Can you imagine why? Two female combatants, one of which is basically naked, and I just finished suffocating through Rogue vs. Wonder Woman, and I already knew what was ahead later down the line. So how many horny jokes does it take to get to the center of this horse shit? Only one. It was fine. Other than that, there's really not much to say about the analysis, so what about the fight? Well, it's actually kind of fun at points. The goofy-ass nature of both combatants is conveyed well, and it has some fun moments like when they both stop fighting and catch a random butterfly, and them trading combos to build up to the gag where Tao is just swinging at nothing. So, why isn't this any higher? I mean, if you couldn't already tell, I've been splitting hairs for the entire ranking, and I gotta do it here too. There's not really enough super cool moments to bring it to the top 15, and honestly, I don't really care enough about either combatant or the matchup for it to really matter. At its core, this episode's not that special, but given its competition, I can afford to be nicer to it. I like Boba Fett vs. Samus Aran decent enough, but it definitely has them good old first episode quirks. Wiz and Boomstick sound like the exact same person. Samus's analysis is pretty bad with the whole, haha, she looks like a man in her suit thing, and
Somehow, she always seems to lose all her power-ups and upgrades at the beginning of every mission.
Man, someone get this chick a purse.
that being one of 2 episodes to have these fucking health bars that do nothing but remove basically any and all tension, and a conclusion that was less focused on justifying Samus's victory and more play-by-play of what we just heckin' watched. Like most of the season, this episode hasn't aged well at all, but with that said, there's plenty of stuff for me to like, ironically or not. Even though I don't like Samus's analysis, I can't bring myself to say the same about Boba Fett's. They cover his arsenal and accomplishments like they're gushing about him, mostly, and even though it can come off as kind of forced sometimes, there's this obvious level of appreciation that you don't really get much of in Death Battle nowadays. Not to say there isn't any at all, but for the majority of Fett's section, they sound excited to talk about him, and I like that more than I probably should. The fight is fine. Not amazing, but their arsenals play off each other pretty well, and there's some cool moments like this shot of Samus approaching Fett and the death, even though it's kind of weird how plasma beam to the face is treated like a decapitation and not like, you know, exploding his whole face off, but I mean, whatever. Maybe I'm willing to be kinder to this episode since it is the first one, so of course it's not going to be that great, but it is pretty admirable that Ben was able to make this despite having next to no prior animation experience. Or maybe because it's this high up because most of what I already talked about is trash and this narrowly escaped that category, I don't know. I like Pikachu vs. Blanca more than I reasonably should. There's not much to say about the analysis, but each section has at least one moment I like. Pikachu's section calculates his EV training based on his early feats in the anime, and while yeah, it can be kinda weird to apply game logic to an anime episode, I liked it here because it helps justify Pikachu's above average speed. Blanca's section also calls being trained by Dan Hibiki anti-training, and that sends me every time. The fight is short and mostly kinda boring, and the ending analysis says this:
Blanca can resist the electric attacks, and the Iron Tail is a steel-type move, which as we all know is weak against electricity.
But as stupid of a reason as it may be, I'm gonna be honest, the real reason is this high up is the end. Oh, but it comes out of nowhere, and that's why it's so good! The fight damn near put me to sleep, and it almost started to get cool with the final clash, so just abruptly ending the fight is probably the best way for it to stand out, even a little bit. I also really love how Blanca charges the blender with his own electricity, and how ending the fight as it did in the first place communicates how Pikachu really did not stand that much of a chance anyway. Doesn't really make up for the rest of the episode in my opinion, but hey, at least I can say it had something. Thank God they redid this one. Link vs. Cloud is known for two things: whatever the hell I'm looking at here, and these guidelines. Starting with the latter, I mean, yeah, I get why they narrowed down the arsenals of an RPG character and another character known for their huge inventory to what they're most known for in fighting game appearances for the sake of fairness, as well as it just generally being a season 1 episode, so of course I don't expect some hugely in-depth research like some Don Gero horse shit. But at the same time, all it ultimately did was lowball the fucking heck out of both these characters, Cloud especially, and made for just the most boring representations of these characters. Like, come on, why not do some Don Gero horse shit? There's not much else to say about the analysis, other than how Cloud's end clip sucks, and one of Link's feats being Puzzle Solver. Look at him go. Now the fight... whew. Yeah, this is the first ever 3D animation, so of course I'm gonna be more lenient here, but gee... that's not much of this holds up. All the movements are so stiff and awkward, like there's almost no torso animation going on, and even if there is, it's mainly for individual poses rather than for more natural movement. There's still plenty to like though. It's fast and frantic with a lot of cool moments, like them rapidly striking each other with their swords, Link dodging the cross slash, Link reflecting the Thundaga spheres, Link jumping off the pillar to attack Cloud. Okay, yeah, Link does basically all the cool shit. But even disregarding the jank, there's still some stupid. Not a fan of Link just throwing his boomerang for the sake of a whoa, he set that up all along to get this sword bit, but he threw it well before he got disarmed, so really just looked like Link said, I'm just gonna toss this for a sec and get my ass kicked. The Omni Slash part would have been very cool if the camera and motion blur took their Adderall, and then there's everything that follows. The blood splatter on Link's second to last sword swing is goofy. Cloud just gives up when Link throws the bombs. Link's final hit is just him doing his best linear blur and a white streak that turns into a barred door transition to white. But then we get a somber moment where Cloud's body gracefully falls towards the floor, allowing for his own death to leave an impression on Link, as he pays his due respect for the man he ironically just murdered. Nah, I'm just kidding. That was a prank, you stupid nerds! Dear God, I had way more to say about this than I wanted, but it just goes to show how much it sucks ranking this fight at around the halfway mark, because if more time went to smoothing out the animation and having an in-sequence that doesn't do this, we're looking at easy top 5 material. But the really dated animation and otherwise dumb moments really bogged this down for me. But saying bogged down in 13 out of 25 is kind of funky, so I'm just gonna move on now. Alright boys, we're now at a place that I would like to call episodes I consistently enjoy all throughout, and ranking them was really hard, so please forgive me if the best explanation I have for placing certain episodes above others is I just like this more land. Don't worry though, your only entry fee's a pack of Twizzlers. So, Master Chief versus Doom Guy. The analysis doesn't have anything of note but one thing, and that's Boomstick basically orgasming over the BFG and Unmaker. And it's actually really good. I'd sooner believe Boomstick would fuck a gun than he would a big titty anime girl. As for the fight, it's pretty good. There's some dumb things here, like Doom Guy walking 2 inches an hour when they said he can outrun his own rockets, and for some reason, Chief waits till Doom Guy's invincibility to wear off so he can shoot his knee of all places. But I really liked how Chief and Doom Guy's arsenals plays off each other, and Doom Guy constantly switching weapons throughout the fight. But easily the best moment is the death. Apparently Chief being able to throw a grenade through the plasma shield is some goofy shit, but the dramatic timing for Doom Guy to realize what's happening, to his cut-off scream, to the dramatic reveal at the end, to the music choice, to this, it's one of the best deaths in the season, hands down. That said, this fight should absolutely be next in line for a rematch. There's just way more you can do with both characters, especially incorporating more hand-to-hand combat with physical weapons, and sprites just do not fit either character at all. It's not gonna happen for years now, considering we just got a Season 1 rematch, and Chief's more likely to fight Samus next anyway, but I'd be down to see Master Chief vs. Doomslayer 2026. Most of what I have to say about Batman vs. Spider-Man is also what I just said about Master Chief vs. Doomguy, but the positives here are higher. I thought the arsenals of both characters made for more interesting choreography, as I feel there's more animation potential with Spider-Man's webbing and Batman's various gadgets than just a bunch of guns. Yeah, there's different kinds of guns, and Chief vs. Doomguy uses a lot of them, but most of them have the same function of just firing a thing and watching it go and hurt the other man. Here you see explosives, tethering, distraction, tasing, and just way more interesting hand-to-hand combat. By which I mean there was none in Chief vs. Doomguy, but I digress. On top of that, having better visuals and more fun individual moments like the smoke bit and Batman abusing the hell out of explosives leading to this shit. Really what etched this fight above Chief vs. Doomguy is that, and I'm gonna be real, these two characters are just way more fun to watch fight in general. No offense to either Master Chief or Doomguy, but I'll take Spider-Man's fast cocky ass and Batman's veritable versatility any day. And they made prep time a meme, gotta love it. I liked seeing two big buff sweaty men fight more than Link versus Cloud, Jesus. There's not much to really say about the analysis, but I liked it fine enough. It covers both their movesets pretty well, and I like how their connections are further exemplified by how they're PETA sleep paralysis demons. But what I don't get is how Boomstick hyped up Hagar's introduction with a wrestling-styled intro, only to have Wiz plainly introduce Geef like a Wikipedia article. Like, man, that's boring. The fight, while short, is pretty fun. I liked the tense hold at the beginning. I also really liked how they went over how Geef copied Hagar's lariat in the analysis and translated that into the fight where Geef completely misses his own lariat, only for Hagar to successfully land his own. We then get a shot of a skyscraper panning up as the two buff men beat the shit out of each other and lay waste to their environment off screen, which I would like more if I wasn't reminded how this was made in 2011. Some more back and forths, and then we get a really intense buildup as the two spinning pile drive each other off the skyscraper, followed by the satisfying reveal of Geef's victory. I've heard complaints about this sequence lasting too long, but I disagree. I think it's just long enough to be suspenseful and gives you enough time to guess who's gonna make it out alive. Plus, it's a cool fucking shot, like, come on. It's not perfect still. I kinda wish Hagar threw his pipe to trigger Geef's banishing flat rather than the move being used as a parry, but there's also this one shot where they get into fisticuffs and then just stand there for like a second, and then they just continue, like, what? But I'll be honest, the main reason I put this episode so high up is the conclusion, where Wiz talks about how Geef won, and Boomstick constantly interrupting him to mourn Hagar's loss in just the most dopey way possible, and it's so funny, even to this day. It's a reminder that the host can be biased towards specific combatants, but not let it affect their results. There have been other episodes where a host was like upset that a character lost, but this one was easily my favorite. Maybe after all the misogyny and horny shit I talked about, I just like seeing Boomstick suffer, I guess. Well, I mean, not always, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I don't usually like to draw attention to my spicy hot takes, but let's see how this one goes. Back when Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash was announced, I immediately assumed that it wasn't going to be that entertaining with a totally obvious winner. I mean, I was a dumb 15-year-old that despaired even a whiff of My Little Pony because, well, I was an angsty male teenager, like, come on.
An old demi boy, though, that's different.
Then the episode came out, and my initial impression was completely wrong. It was actually a very entertaining episode with a totally obvious winner. Just one look at that thumbnail, there was zero doubt, really. There's not much to go into about the analysis, but as much as I feel for Starscream fans, it was also kind of funny how he went into how he kind of sucks, and how Boomstick started off reluctant to talk about My Little Pony, but slowly realizes that Rainbow Dash is insane. A wonderful start to Boomstick's brony arc, for sure. In spite how the fight reeks of a spite match against Starscream, I mean, he only lands like 2 hits the entire fight. I don't know, compared to the rest of this season, I enjoyed it fine enough. Given how both these characters originated from kids shows, it felt like I was watching a Saturday morning cartoon. Sure, the humor's kind of immature, but I'll gladly take that over killing 2 real-life children and Boomstick actively acting like a sexual predator. I also liked how Starscream used his silver tongue to get the upper hand. Little moments like that didn't need to be in the fight, but it's always appreciated when they let the characters be the characters. That said, the death is not good. They explicitly say Starscream's spark is unkillable, and they justify it with a haha, it's a fate worse than death in a Q&A where they say all he could possess was a
sewing machine.
And like, the fight's already a joke fight to begin with, so to have a definitive result while shitting on one of the combatants is not really that great of a look. But hey, I mean, I still need to stress that given all the horseshit I've sat through this season, I really don't care. Goomba vs. Koopa is a gag match in the 4th episode of the show's history, so by those accounts, this episode should not work at all. But somehow it's better than a majority of the series matchups this season. Literally how? I like how concise the analysis is. Because there's like almost nothing to go over for these basic Mario enemies, it allows the analysis to not only be short, but also be more humor-based to make up for how little there is to offer. My favorite gag is how Boomstick reacts to the Goomba holding a baseball and how Wiz cuts him off to continue talking about the Goomba. As well as instead of having clips play at the end of each character's section, Boomstick just directly insults them. And while in any other episode that's not a good thing, it just fits way too well here. The The fight is also way better than it has any right to be. It makes use of the environment very well. It can be surprisingly tense at points, and they somehow gave way more to both these characters than the 3 episodes that preceded it, and most other episodes that came out in years after this one. It also culminates in a very tense but also very funny anticlimax where it looks like the Goomba will get the win, but nah. Though it can be kind of jarring at points given that there are plenty of moments where either the two should have died, and the fight just ignores each moment completely immediately after. And once again, it reminds you that it's a death battle episode released in 2011. Pretty Kino raw whiz. The TMNT Battle Royale was the first death battle I ever watched, so let's try to figure out if it's this high because of nostalgic attachment or whether or not it's actually good. Let's start with the analysis, and for the most part, it's pretty not good. Wiz and Boomstick get like 3 or 4 lines apiece, and it gives the briefest of brief synopses of each turtle. Now, it's kind of understandable since this was released in an era with 15-minute upload constraints and no bonker stats, and they had to talk about 4 characters that are already pretty easy to discuss, but it feels way too short in my opinion. Like, a minute each was given for each character, and it doesn't really go over each of them very well in an interesting way. And then they actively shit all over Michelangelo because his accomplishments apparently don't matter because he doesn't deserve them, blames his goofy and dim-witted personality on drugs, and calls him a slur. I would say it again, but out of respect to those making a drinking game out of this, I'm not going to put you in comatose. That said, I really like the fight. It conveys the gaps between each turtle really well, not only by the order in which they die, but also how each death is spaced apart, in spite of how they treated poor Mikey. I also liked how Donnie's strategy gave him an advantage against Raph at first, but then he gets serious and does all this shit to convey how Raph's aggression beats Donnie's intelligence, despite it not really being in character. Followed by a really intense sequence of Raph and Leo clashing, and an even more intense buildup where Raph gets a hold of Leo's swords, with a result not obvious at first. Like, I can't believe we got an ending this good, this early on in the show. But bringing it back to the beginning, is this episode actually good, or is my nostalgia talking? Well, there's a lot I like and dislike, but given that TMNT was a part of my childhood, as well as the fact that I wouldn't have known about Death Battle had this episode not been my introduction, I can't help but feel at least like some kind of attachment to it. Let's be fair, if any episode not in the bottom 3 were my first episode, I'd probably rank him this high too.
He's an unstoppable human holocaust.
Death Battle can be good, I swear to Christ. I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed Akuma vs.
Shang Tsung,
considering how much there was going against it aging well. Let's see, it's the second episode. The connections are literally just fighting game villains with attacks that target the soul, and the analysis is a beautiful kind of awkward, such as the human holocaust line, and how Boomstick makes a joke about what he would do with Sung's transformation power, and how much it reminded me of a joke from the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Die. But the animation more than makes up for it. On the surface, it may seem simple, but it communicates the advantages each character have over the other very well. Akuma immediately goes on the offensive and does massive damage in such a short time, but before he can secure the kill, Shang Tsung gets the upper hand and uses different fighting styles and sneaky soul-sucking to slowly turn the tide in his favor. All of which communicate in the former's hellishly offensive fighting style and the latter's cunning and more varied arsenal. All this leads into a phenomenal final act when Tsung transforms into Akuma, gets into a big fancy old DBZ-like fisticuffs, and then one of the Akumas uses the Raging Demon securing the victory, all without revealing which Akuma is the real one until the very end, and it's done really well. But to be fair, I kind of figured it out when the real Akuma never used the Raging Demon until the end, and Shang Tsung never saw it, but details. This was the only other time I got to see these health bars, and as much as I don't miss them, this fight was by far the better use of them. They're way more of a compliment to the fight rather than a distraction with the back and forth nature of it, as well as making the end reveal more impactful when Tsung's bar only depletes as we know he's the one that lost. It does kind of stink that this was only the second episode since Tsung only transforms into one character rather than it being taken any decent advantage of, but oh well, everything else is still really good in my opinion. Out of all the ways I can describe Vegeta vs. Shadow, it being funny was not the way I remembered it. But at the same time, Team 4-Star got involved, so really I'm just a wee bit stupid for not remembering it correctly. It was the first death battle with voice acting, so of course the dialogue is what sticks out heavily in the fight. But it also adds a bit of storytelling. Even though the story is basically Shadow senses Vegeta, they introduce and insult each other, and then it begins. But hey, it's a step up from character walks in frame, fight. The exchanges Vegeta and Shadow have are pretty funny, like Vegeta's response to Super Shadow, and Shadow interrupting Vegeta as he toots his own cock. But a few funnies don't often carry an episode for me, Some of the action surprisingly holds up to this day. Shadow's speed and Vegeta's durability are conveyed well in a really fast-paced sequence, and even though the action doesn't last long and the fight kind of slows down a little too much for my liking, Vegeta punching the moon and Shadow teleporting it away more than makes up for it, as not only it's something I would believe either character is capable of doing, but they somehow made teleporting a moon PNG feel fucking incredible. Shadow's death, while it stinks in concept, also allows it to be more memorable with more emphasis on comedy like the rest of the episode. Although maybe part of me wishes they maybe toned back just a little bit on the comedy. Yeah, I know, funny that I of all people ask, and it's not like it's bad, just when I think of a fight between these two characters, I don't really often associate either of them with the funny ha-has, even in spite of how in-character both their interactions are with one another. Even still, it's in the top 5, what do you want from me? But unironically, I think the funniest part of the whole episode was them calling Super Saiyan 1 near indestructible in the analysis. Like, sure. Why the hell is Thor versus Raiden in my top 5? I mean, the matchup is... well, it makes sense since they're both gods of thunder, but call me the god of not giving a shit. The analysis is also a whole bunch of whatever, but at least Boomstick says Raiden has godly power, capable of smashing through solid concrete. Bet he got that off of Corinthians. So with that going forward, I was expecting a 6 out of a 10, but it's more like a 7.5.
Considering the season in question and adjusting for inflation, that's like an 11.
If there's one thing I felt like Lange did best with all of his animations, it was whenever a character can just go apeshit with speedy quick combos for like no reason other than it looking really cool. And Thor versus Raiden is the second best in that regard, but still really good. Raiden's not really a speedy character as far as I know, but being a lankier god of thunder than Beefcake Thor, it just feels natural given his teleportation and the physical combos he's animated with. Meanwhile, Thor gets a lot of cool showcases of his strength, like uprooting an entire tree, causing tremors, and generally landing a lot of meaty hits. Despite how the sprites clash in just the most special way, its fast action and pacing more than make up for it. They both have really cool interactions like flying towards each other, the sequences inside the tornado, and how Raiden teleports away from being hit by Thor's hammer by having the camera follow Mjolnir. And the only hit Mjolnir lands on Raiden is using the most comically overkill death in the whole show. Thor just splits Raiden in half and just tosses him into the sun, and all he says is, farewell. It's so goofy, but so fucking cool. I think part of what makes this fight stand out so much for me is the music choice. I don't know shit about Liquid Tension Experiment, nor do I really know what made them decide to use Acid Rain in this, but it sells the fast-paced action of the fight very well, and it kind of makes me miss when they had all the freedom in the world with their music choice. Ah well, everything about this fight still slaps way harder than it should. The TMNT Battle Royale may have been the first death battle I watched, but Mario vs. Sonic was the first death battle I remember being really hyped for when it was announced, and I don't think I really need to explain why. While the analysis is very mid, you should know at this point I think the fight more than makes up for it. Their power-ups counter and cancel each other out in very interesting ways, and the fight itself has a ton of really cool moments. It starts off with the two landing quick combos on each other, and then I really like the montage set to the final Bowser theme of Galaxy 2 as they continue the fight to the volcano, before getting absolutely pranked. The fight then slows down a bit for an underwater sequence, but I think it's totally fair here since, I mean, they literally just got exploded out of a volcano by a dozen bombs. Yeah, take that, Vegeta versus Shadow! When Sonic powers up, there's more power-up shenanigans followed by a really intense chase sequence and a slightly janky but creative and gruesome kill. It's a decently long fight, even by Season 1 standards, and it conveys its humor and epic factors really well. If there's anything I think that does hold this episode back for me, it's probably the fact they gave Sonic a voice actor and just used voice clips for Mario. I mean, don't get me wrong, Caden Red Pearl captures the essence of Sonic very well, but hearing his voice clips alongside already existing Mario clips kind of took me out of it a bit. But even still, this is one of my favorite matchups they've done, and the payoff was more than worth the wait. And I guess the same can be said about the 2011 release too. All the Sonic episodes made the top 5. How did we get here? Man, remember when they hyped the shit out of Eggman vs. Wily? They made a ton of neat little trailers and made the matchup way more exciting since they're giving as much as possible to both combatants, and it made the guessing game super exciting. And even then, there were still surprises when the episode actually came out because they weren't just giving the doctors their strongest mechs, they were doing basically everything they could, like common enemies, piloted mechs, and whatever other miscellaneous shit they can cover because fuck you, it's awesome. This was Ben's last animation of the show, and it surpasses everything else he did, and it's not even close. There's a couple bits of bad dialogue, but everything else is spectacular. It changes whoever's in the lead constantly, so it never gets boring. Wily's infantry trumps Eggman's, then the Badniks take the lead, and then the Robot Masters even the playing field, and then Metal Sonic and Bass enter too and take out most of the remaining lesser infantry, and then Eggman and Wily begin to duke it out themselves. There's so much that goes on, but not once does it feel overwhelming. That said, the ending kinda stinks. Metal Sonic just lets himself get taken by the Robo-Enza. Metal Overlord's transformation, while it was cool, the Egg Fleet did jack shit anyway, and everyone just gets lasered to death in the most boring way, followed by a cop-out conclusion that doesn't really settle on a victor, nor does it explain how Metal would get infected and outgun Wily's forces. I kinda get the idea of a joke conclusion, but for a fight with this much hype and build-up, it just kinda felt like a letdown. But it doesn't ruin how amazing this fight ended up being overall either. But it's not enough to take the top spot. Yeah, this wasn't even close. It's so unfair to the rest of the season to have a literal magnum opus in the lineup. Like, literally anyone watching this saw this coming. But in my long life of making dumb ranking videos on the internet, I've had to be honest with myself with my rankings, despite how obvious the result is. That's right, boys, it's time to talk about Death Battle versus the World. What an achievement this one was. It's the perfect blend of merch advertisement while staying true to Death Battle's usual formula. Most of the jokes work for me, and the overall scale of the fight by how dominant one shirt was is unparalleled to anything Death Battle has done before and since. Of course, after watching this, I had to go out and buy a shirt of my own. 10 years after the fact, but oh well. Goku vs. Superman's kinda okay, I guess. You all know I was mega lenient on this entire season, but even if they were all objectively really good, it did not matter. More than any other episode in Death Battle history, even the ones I prefer over it, none of them will match the scale and importance and impact and all the other epic big boy words that Goku vs. Superman accomplished. Right before the analysis begins, you can tell from the custom orchestral track, them specifying that they will use as many sources as possible, all the stipulations, the epic opening credits, right in your face. You know, this isn't your grandpappy's Death Battle, this is an event. While not everything holds up, mainly the lowballing of both characters, awkward statistics, the jarring Team 4-star opener, and the fact that the animation still isn't the prettiest looking or most fluidly animated, what this episode does wrong is an atom in the ocean compared to what this episode does right. Both analysis segments are amazing. They go over basically everything, from power sets to fundamentals of their respective universes, even what they represent as characters and their impact on modern culture, in a way you either don't get much or just treat it as a pop-up in the corner nowadays. And then we get to the fight. It's almost 10 minutes long and there's never a dull moment. Death Battle may have featured characters that are technically more powerful by their own logic. The use of effects and sound design makes it so few other episodes can match how fast and powerful Goku and Superman are portrayed. Everything, and I mean everything, is as impactful and as in character as you would want. It captures the high-octane action of Dragon Ball super well, and it also captures the epic superheroism of both by letting certain music play and Goku sparing Superman of a cringy fate, all because Goku wants to fight Superman at his peak. Moments like that make you realize you can't just swap Goku or Superman with some random Saiyan or Kryptonian, because then you wouldn't have the essence of what makes Goku and Superman so beloved. The entire fight has a very natural progression from fighting in the streets at base, to powering up and taking the fight to the mountains and eventually space. Everything culminates into one of the most epic endings in the show's history. After the breather from the amazing beam clash sequence, both characters power up one last time. Superman rams Goku into the Earth's core, music swells, both throw out their strongest attacks, and then boom. Goku dies and Superman gets knocked out after they threw everything they had at each other. Planets have blown up
since then,
but even to this day, they really have not felt like a whole planet blowing up more than this. One last side note, but this is the episode that makes me miss when Death Battle were free to use whatever music they wanted. It adds so much to not just the fight, but even the analyses feel way more epic than it has any right to be. I don't know what else to tell you. This segment already went on for way too long, but Goku vs. Superman is an episode that's so obviously amazing, in a way that you can't swap it around and make something like Mario vs. Sonic or Eggman vs. Wily the season finale, because as good as those episodes are, they really don't push themselves to be something as truly special. Like I said, this wasn't your grandpappy's Death Battle. That was Goku vs. Superman.
And that was Death Battle Season 1, boys!
Man, that season was crusty. Aside from the literal magnum opus, there's just too much of the season that aged too poorly for me to really give the entire season higher than like a 6 out of 10. Analysis segments have had too much uncredited fan art, poor coverage of the characters, and some really awful dialogue and line delivery. And a lot of pre-language animations have had hilarious pixel quality, stiff motion, stock video effects. They just haven't stood the test of time very well.
Objectively speaking, yes, this is the worst season of Death Battle, but if there's anything that helps carry it, it's gotta be its charm. and that other episode, but mostly it's charm.
Nowadays, you have, you know, research teams, animators, editors, and like money to throw around, but there's something to be said when the show felt more indie. Season 1 felt like something to make with the boys and discuss things they were passionate about. That's not to say the landscape was completely different. They still had sponsorships and a head company to put the show on, but it's always interesting to look at a show during its grassroots staging compared to the show we have now. Oh, and also being the first season also gives it a hell of a lot more leeway, but you already knew that. With all that said, I still wouldn't really say this is the worst season of Death Battle, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there, just wait.
I plan on making ranking videos for each season of Death Battle as a way to help look back on the show and celebrate its history during its 10th anniversary season. But for now, hey, thanks for watching. You know, feel free to subscribe, comment on how I'm a dumb nerd, you know, feed me the YouTube algorithm. You know, it's kind of funny since this script took me ages to write and I was in a hell of a rut during it, but hopefully the load on the next season will be much lighter.